All right. Hello, everyone. That's a new thing that Zoom is doing, telling you the recording is starting. Anywho, welcome to Move for a Movement with Alexandra Cook. She is the Youth and Family Programs Director with Mark Morris Dance Group. So happy to have you here, Alexandra.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Catherine.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I met Alexandra. I was starting to review things in the New York dance world, saw her work. We connect in the fact that we come from the small but mighty state of Rhode Island. You don't always meet people commonly from Rhode Island, so that was fun. um, yeah, how you doing generally as pandemic starts to maybe wrap up a little bit? Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I was saying, our we recently had an event on the plaza across from the dance center this past weekend where the company was performing and our student company was performing. We had a whole bunch of outdoor classes, and it started to finally feel like again, I'm doing the part of my job that I I signed up for, um, and less like pandemic response within the context of my job. So, very hopeful at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. All of these different people in the dance world who, their jobs to keep these things running. They're not like epidemiologists or like emergency response. Like that's not technically, again, like you said, what they signed up for, what they're trained in, what they're experienced in. But it's like, okay, this is what we have to do. Do the best we can. That's all of us have really been able to do through this. But it's quite a
Hmm.
challenge if you think about it. A whole different kind of position, a whole new role, whole new set of skills.
Yeah, completely. And I think, looking at information as it comes out from various sources and ensuring that you're reading that information correctly and you're interpreting it in the same way that other arts and culture organizations are interpreting it. So um, I know that a lot of people feel this way. One of the things that I think um, has been, an unforeseen um, thing that has come out of being within this unique context of the pandemic has been that we've really collaborated as arts organizations in a way that previously we maybe didn't. So
Right.
hoping that that's something that we can keep as we move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that feeling of we're all in it together, so we unite or we fall, a sort of external challenge that we're all facing. So let's help each other as much as we can.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Completely.
Mm, love it. So let's say in non-pandemic times or how you're, it sounds like you're starting to get back to, what does the day-to-day of your work look like directing a youth and family program for a major dance company?
Yeah. So you know, brass tacks of it are really that I oversee the school at the dance center. We have programs for children 18 months through 18 years within youth and families, and of course, their associated families. And then I also oversee our community education programs, which um, are the programs that go offsite typically. Obviously, that has worked a little bit differently over the past year. Um, but, I think one of the things that makes us unique as an organization is that our school is very intentionally set up as a non pre professional program. Um,
Mm,
the tagline that we often use, which is a pulled quote from something Mark said, is dance is for anybody. And the full quote is actually something to the effect of, um, you know, dance isn't for everybody, it's for anybody. Um, and the idea being that, not every person is going to be interested in engaging in dance, but if you are interested in engaging in dance, then you should have the opportunity to do so. And you should have the
mm,
opportunity to do so, by the way, in whatever way that feels most appropriate for you. So if you're 7 and you want to come for 45 minutes a week and that's enough dance for you, you should still be able to have really high quality instruction. And if you want to have a more intensive experience and come on a regular basis and have the opportunity to perform, you should have the opportunity to do that as well. So we offer both of those options within the school. Um, and so the curricula that are delivered within each kind of sector of the youth and family programs, whether they're on site at the dance center or off site, are actually the same. They're simply
Hmm.
adapted for the specific environment that they are taking place within. And certainly the community education programs leverage the knowledge and, um, you know, history and tradition of the partners with whom we're working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Just because it is in a school doesn't mean that the teaching is any less rigorous, any less high caliber. It's still a really great instruction. I think that's important because there could be kind of an attitude, I feel like, in some dance circles of like, oh, it's not in the studio and these are just kids in a public school, like, a little bit sticking
Yeah,
those,
absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's a beautiful and really important attitude that, that's not there, that it's like, no matter where you are, we're going to give all we can as dance educators, as teaching artists.
Right. And recently, the school has actually, and I should say the community programs, have begun to implement a culturally responsive educational approach
Hmm.
um, with the specific intention of ensuring that students feel a sense of belonging, no matter what their background is. And in fact, are bringing, um, their traditions and their heritage and just the context of their own specific upbringing and background into the classroom.
Hmm. You alluded to that a little bit before too. I was thinking the sense of what the students can bring to the educational experience, because if it's just this didactic, like this is what you do, you kind of start to question, like, what do the students have to be interested in? Like, they might be interested, of course, but um, when you really can engage the students in their own learning, and it's like what the students have to contribute to their own learning, that is the space where learning really happens, I feel like.
Yeah,
Because
and
people.
I think there's also, a real missed opportunity. You might have a student in the room who, their parent has played an instrument their entire life. And, if we were walking into a space, whether it be in the studio or in the community, and saying, like, I'm going to deliver the education now to you on a platter, and this is the only way through which you can experience it, we miss the opportunity to engage with the things that they have knowledge in and that they can bring to that space.
Mm, yeah, this idea of, we're all teachers and we're all learners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's how that's an ethos I try to live by. So, the optimal word there being try, but
Sure. I think that's, where we all are, right?
yeah,
I, I
yeah.
think, very specifically, actually, the best teachers approach things that way, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you have to be willing to admit that you don't have all the knowledge. And in fact, you have to have the curiosity to strive for more information in order to even be someone that it's worth, studying under. Because
Yeah.
if you're not constantly looking for new information, then things can start to feel stale and outdated and
Yeah.
not relevant.
Hmm. And this idea almost, if like a student asks you something, you don't know the answer, or it's not something that you can't figure out. It's like, okay, let's research this together, or let's solve this problem together. And, that is a model to the student of how you go about solving a problem or finding an answer. And, in the sense of contemporary or modern dance, like, it's all problem solving. It's like, okay, you start with nothing. The problem is, let's build to something. So the creative process itself is that it's research, it's problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so all these things intertwining, importantly, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, and like in dance education, like we're not just teaching steps. That's the important thing. It's like we're teaching creative process and how to create and how to think in
Yeah,
that way.
certainly. Certainly. And I think, you're also presenting, I mean, this is something we've been having a lot of conversations about. You're presenting a specific cultural understanding of the world, right? Every dance form has its culture, whether
Mm,
it's implicit or explicit. And so it's important to make that explicit for students when it might
mm,
be something that's more
right.
implicit, because of this idea of having an understanding of where things come from. Because ultimately, if we are
Mm,
teaching students to be artists, we want them to understand those reference points. We want them to say, I studied this and I'm pulling this reference point from here, and therefore it shows up in my art in this way. Um, and I think, that ends up creating some of the most interesting art is when you are able to connect with people with a reference point that they understand. But you have to
right.
understand where those reference points come from in order to use them effectively in your artwork.
Yeah, and that, I think there's a lot of conversation around the difference between appropriation and appreciation. I feel like that appreciation, the foundation of that is that deeper understanding. When you have, at least in dance,
Mhm.
engage with it in an embodied way, like you have felt it in your body. You have gone to the source in a certain way, like someone who studied with Mark, or you've engaged with primary source text, like things like that. You have engaged with it in a deep way versus like appropriation, you saw it on a video and then you did it, like that is a lot of where that difference could be. I feel like it's
Yeah.
more complicated than that, but
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, um, there's so much about tradition really in there. And I think if we look at the principles of white supremacist culture, that's something that is a part of it, right? Is this um, kind of wiping away of what has come before in order to say, like, well, this is just an idea and this is how everybody does it, when the reality of the situation is like, well, this is how the dominant culture does it.
right.
And and let's have a discussion about that and where that's come from. um,
Mm,
which, I think some of these ideas, when you're talking about how they then manifest within like a creative dance class for 4-year-olds, it can seem a little like heady and disconnected, but actually I feel like it is quite concrete,
right.
because it comes down to this idea, and this is something that we've discussed a lot in the school. The way that our leveling works is that we have parent and toddler classes, 18 months to 4 years old. And then
Mm,
every student in the school from 4 to 6 is in creative dance. Um,
mm,
and then once they reach 6 years old, they go and choose which technique they'd like to study, whether that be, ballet, modern, jazz, hip hop, West African. And you know, that leveling works the same way. It goes fundamentals A through level 5. So fundamentals A, B, 1 through 5. And the way that we talk about the creative dance classes is that they really are preparing you to, once you hit age 6, um, go into any of the classes,
mm,
right,
mhm,
that are
mhm.
available for study within the technical forms at the school, which means then that we have to really break down, okay, what are the things that carry across genre that we're going to ensure that students have under their belt before they decide which dance form they're going to go into. Because ultimately, if I'm teaching my students about polyrhythm in a creative dance class, which is absolutely something we do, then they are prepared to move into West African dance class, absolutely. But they're also prepared for when that polyrhythm then comes up between arms and legs in ballet class, right? So there are different ways of thinking about this and ensuring that you're really preparing students. And I think the way that we do that within the school is through this idea of diving in through concepts. And that's where you can make those ideas that seem like, well, this sure is, great in theory, but it's like, yeah, it can come out in a concrete way. This isn't like,
Mm,
just something to talk about.
right. I love all that. I'm currently working on a piece, just kind of looking at the phrase like ballet is the foundation of all dance forms. When people say that, I think what they mean is ballet brings many great tools for dance artists, right? If you want to be a dance artist,
Yeah.
but that's not the only source, right? And I feel like Mark Morris, like what you just described as an educational model, is a great way. It's a kind of inverting that to be like, okay, what do all dance forms need? You could bring that to ballet. You could bring it to West African. You could bring it to modern. Um,
Well, I
versus
also
like,
feel like, what people have meant by that in the past really is this idea that ballet is the foundation of the these specific dance forms that they were thinking about in their head,
all right, there's that,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The cultural,
It's like,
culturally limited view, 100%, yeah.
it's the foundation of all dance forms, and it's like, I mean, certainly there's a very strong argument to be made that it's the foundation of classical modern dance. But as soon as we start to think about like any dance form, I mean, I'm not saying anything revolutionary or groundbreaking here, but
Right.
like every culture in the world dances. Every human culture that has ever existed has danced in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't all take ballet class. So
That started with Louis XIV, way after like cave people dancing as ritual. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we could get deep into that. Maybe another time. We will, but yeah, with that all in mind, I'm curious if there are certain like guiding principles in this work that you could define, whether, it's just sort of by Mark Morris, like working on behalf of them, or like for you personally in this work, if there are sort of guiding points that you could define or delineate.
yeah, I mean, I think I certainly have both understandings that kind of come through, specifically through my work at the Dance Center. We have core values. And one, we have four core values, and it's community, access, artistic excellence, and oh my goodness, it's gone. Creativity. Wow.
I thought you were like seeing, I was like, does she have a pet that's like doing something crazy?
No, my mind just went completely blank for a moment. So
It
yeah, those
happens.
are our
It
four.
happens all the time. Best of us.
Those are our four core values.
Love it. Got it.
And those are the things that guide us in education. And we have a whole visual taxonomy, and certainly we're guided by the New York City arts blueprint for teaching and learning in dance. That's something that we plug into, and we have specific goals that we've established for what we want children to get out of our class. So there are obviously dance technique is one of them. Music is another, specifically because of the way that Mark works artistically. We want to ensure that students have a strong understanding of vocabulary within both of those, that they have an opportunity to compose and improvise. We also want to make sure that we're building 21st century skills for them. So this comes down to communication, collaboration between students, creative thinking, critical thinking. So these are all different things that, we speak with our teaching artists about ensuring that they're delivering through their curricula. We also, I mean, I cannot speak enough for the faculty who I work with and rely upon to ensure that, the curriculum gets delivered in the way that we specify. One of the things that I appreciate about them, and in fact we search for in our teaching artists, is a real dedication to the art of teaching. I don't have teaching artists working on our faculty who make up their class as an afterthought. They are
The
teaching
craft.
artists.
It is
They are
pedagogy. It is a
educators.
craft. Yeah.
That's what they're focused on. And that's a very intentional choice by us as an organization to hire people who have that focus. And so those are all things that as an organization, certainly we're focused on. Um, I think the thing that drives me personally, and why I feel, as I'm sure as a parent from my soapboxiness, so passionate about
Love it.
dance education and its importance is that, dance education changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
I I was highly affected by my ability to experience dance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I certainly found it to be a creative outlet. I certainly found it to be a physical outlet. It's where my community is. Um, and I was really lucky in that, as I grew into my profession, I was also able to experience um, multiple different types of dance. I had
Mm-hmm.
training from a very young age in classical ballet mainly, but then had quite extensive training in dances of the African diaspora, and then certainly within contemporary modern dance. And, I've had the opportunity to be in theater and to engage with, folk dances from Eastern Europe. And
Mm-hmm.
I am so grateful for every variety of dance experience that I have had because I could not lead a school that offers that variety of dance experience without having the context of studied those dance forms.
Yes.
I use it
Thank you.
every day. Like truly. There's no hyperbole there. I use that experience every day of my life in my job. So I think it's
It
really
goes back to the
I was just
yeah, it goes back to the importance of personal experience. That embodied experience. Like you have literally felt those forms in your body, and that guides what you do. It's not necessarily dancing those forms every day, but it's your understanding of that context of what it is.
yeah, for sure.
And that is a great segue to talk a little bit. Thank you for the setting up beautiful segue about your work as a choreographer. You were a dance artist yourself. Um, yeah, I saw one work of yours. It's very rooted in personal identity and sort of exploring that and a vulnerability around that I thought was really beautiful. I'm curious if that's something that you're interested in when it comes to art making, or if that was kind of a just an exploration that you wanted to get into at that point. Yeah, and a wider question, maybe like, what are you interested in as an artist?
Sure. Wow. What a question to answer. I I don't know that I'm so much drawn to personal identity within work specifically. I think that it can be a really great thing to dive into. I think within my own work, I certainly find it a place where I find a lot of inspiration. But I don't know that I'm necessarily drawn to work like that. I think work that, annoys me the most generally is um, work that feels overly referential to something that's been done before. Um,
Mm,
which is why I think that as much as I love and appreciate classical ballet as a form, I'm not as interested in making work within that form because I don't feel quite as much freedom in the use of movement vocabulary. Uh, there are plenty of people that do, and I'm certainly not imputing their work, but it's just not what I feel draws me personally, because it feels limiting in terms of the actual movement vocabulary that's available there.
yeah.
Um, in terms of what does drive me as an artist, I think the things I'm most interested in, um, are structure. I have very clear structure to my work. Um, I am also
Yes, from what I've seen, I will I will co-sign that. Yes.
um, I also, and unsurprisingly, I ended up at Mark Morris Dance Group, but I'm also a very musically driven person. There was a time when I think I felt pushed to not be that way, um,
Mm.
because it was considered like too much of a one-to-one uh,
Been
relationship.
there. I've had that journey too
And I think
in
I
higher education. Oh
eventually,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I certainly appreciate that push in terms of like challenging
Mhm.
me to do something different and work in a really different way. But ultimately, I think I take from that what I need to take from it, and I lean into my musicality a little bit. It's an inherent part of what I appreciate in watching dance work. I like
Yeah.
musicality. It's
Yeah.
not maybe a popular thing to say, but it's interesting to me. Uh,
Same here.
and I think theme is important to me in my work. I do a lot of theme and variation. Um,
Mhm.
it's not important to me that my audience necessarily understand what the theme of my work is necessarily. Yeah.
As long as
I don't
they
know
take
if I
something,
answered the question.
that's what like they take something from it. You've done something as a choreographer, right?
There you
That's
go.
that's what I think, right? And I think that's one of the things I love about art is that you can come away, five different people can come away with five different reactions or perceptions or interpretations, and none of them are wrong. Like in certain cases, maybe it could be like, yeah, that's way off base.
Sure.
But for the most part, 99.9% of the time, it's like, yep, that's great. That's what you took away. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, that's kind of interesting about hearing children react to work,
Mm-hmm.
because they often have a very concrete idea in their head of like, it was about this, and this person was doing that, and that person, had this relationship, and it was, it's very concrete in their head of what the work was about, which just shows their capacity for imagination.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a beautiful reminder that, yep, sometimes it really is that simple. So it works out that way sometimes, I feel like.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as a full time administrator, I'm curious about what your creative life does look like. If, if you find time to make even phrase work and, if there are obstacles there, do you have certain strategies that you found help you to like make it happen? Yeah. What does that look like for you?
Mhm. One of the things I feel very lucky to have been able to do, was I did work with our student company over the
Mm,
past several months to create a work on
nice.
them. I do always find the experience of working with students, it's always fun, but it's of course a little bit different. You have to consider what students are going to connect to in work. You also have to consider what they're able to accomplish. I want my students to feel confident on stage, and I'm not going to give them something that maybe I find like genuinely the most interesting artistic idea that I could come up with, at the expense of their being able to accomplish it well. So I think that's important, but I find it, that's an interesting challenge to me too. Um,
Yeah.
and it's also a fun way to teach them about the actual experience of making work,
Mhm.
because you can present them with lots of different ideas of what it actually means to put together a piece. So we did site specific works with our student company, because of the
Nice.
need to be outdoors, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And that was a cool experience that they had that I don't know that a lot of students their age necessarily get. They're in high school. So having the opportunity to
Right.
participate in a site-specific work is, a little bit rarer for that age group. So
Right.
um, I think other than that, it's hard for me to find time to make work. It has to be if I really get the itch to make something, which does occasionally happen.
Mhm.
Um, More recently, I've been interested. I haven't performed in a really long time, and I've been feeling um, a little bit of an impetus to like find a way to make that happen. But there's also
Right.
the reality of like having to get back into performing shape. I'm not someone, I think it's important as if you're teaching to be taking class.
Right.
So it's not that I haven't been moving at all. It's just that I'm certainly not at a place where I would feel confident get myself back up on the stage. But we'll see. I think the
Right.
other important thing to me, within the context of my work as an administrator, is that um, I always keep that artist brain on,
Mm.
in the back of my head. And I think that that manifests in a multitude of different ways. But, it's helpful to have had the experience of being a freelance teacher. It's helpful to know what it feels like to be a teaching artist walking into a school. It's helpful to have an understanding of being a part of a professional dance company under my belt and what the demands on your time look like in those situations, certainly the demands on your pocketbook. Because, and I think that this is something that's not understood a lot of the time, so I want to be clear with my point. I think it is often thought that a larger arts organization is a monolith and that they are making decisions completely detached from the actual experience of being an artist. And I can say with quite a bit of certainty that 95% of the administrators that I work with who are full-time administrators are either currently working as artists or formerly working as artists. So the
Mhm.
artists
Mhm.
aren't only those who are up on the stage, the artists are in the back too. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that
Mhm.
administrators are often looking at things through the lens of what it means as an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking you're speaking about, and you're referencing this before a little bit too. You have experience in your life being an artist, being, whether you choreograph or you perform on the stage, and then those skills that it builds, to take to other places, whether it's in or out of the dance world. And it seems like that's a key value of what the youth and family programs, what you do, um, because there are so many skills that it takes to be in a room and be part of making it work. Whether you're choreographing, whether you're performing, co-creating in a more sort of contemporary dance context. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one
Yeah,
of the
I think.
things we talk a lot about with our community partners, because we will often get requests when someone reaches out to us about bringing the programs to their school or their community center. Um, of we want this programming and a performance at the end,
Mhm.
and our answer to that is always, well, we don't really do performances with the children.
Mhm.
Um, we will do an invited class day where we can invite families in to observe class and certainly maybe show a little something that students have been working on. But we don't do performances, and here's why. Students are often in this context taking dance class for the very first time.
Mm,
We are asking them to move their bodies, listen to music, pay attention to where the other bodies are in the space, listen to a teacher, understand how that all fits together. Like the list goes on, right?
right.
The last thing that I want them to be thinking about is how does this look for other people?
Mm,
I want them to be focused on learning the actual skills of being a dancer,
right.
and then,
Right.
you know, we can share what class looks like because, I mean, most of the time, no matter where we are working, whether it be in, the most well-resourced school in New York City or a school that is in a neighborhood that's a food desert and is overly policed and, not resourced, well, most of the parents in either room have not had a dance experience within
Mm,
the context of a formal dance classroom. They've probably had social dance experiences. And, there may be an experience here and there of dance education within the context of a formal classroom, but often not. So
mm.
let's show them what that looks like.
Yeah. Process over product. It's like it doesn't have to be for this penultimate
Yeah,
show. Like the work and the learning can be enough.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, it's also another theme that kind of jumped out to me is this idea of discernment. Like I feel like I talk to artists about this a good deal here and there. Um, it's like I'm not interested in that. Doesn't mean it's bad. I'm not maligning it. It's just what my interests are. And as an artist, you need to get there, I feel like that's part of the journey of being an artist is like because whatever you do, you got to commit to it. You got to be intentional about it. 2000%, right? So if you're interested in all these different things, like, I don't believe in saying always or never. Like there could be artists that are interested in many, many things and somehow they make it work cohesively. But for the most part, you got to pick something and be intentional about it, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
read a really interesting book recently, actually, that was recommended to me by one of our board members. Her name is Onay Payne, and I actually, it's right here on my bookshelf. Hold on.
love to see it. Book recommendation time.
It's,
Woo,
it's
nice.
called Unleashed, the Unapologetic Leader's Guide to Empowering Everyone Around You. And
Beautiful.
yeah, one of the main ideas that they talk about in this book, um, and it's written by two women who are married to each other, and they're professors at Harvard Business School.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they talk about is this idea that you have to commit to doing the thing you do well at the expense of doing other things badly. And that's
Yep.
okay. And actually, like, you will not be successful unless you commit to that.
Yeah. Again, had that journey. Been there. Yep. Yeah, and it could be that you're interested in a lot of things, but it's like, what is that one or two, or just what is that small batch of things that is really you? Is where the passion and the skill sets and just the opportunity, like contextually in your life, like where all those things intersect, like that's where you need to really put it all in.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I was also thinking in the context of dance education, that's a really powerful message because like getting out of that binary thinking of like good and bad, it's like something might not be bad, it's just not for you, you know?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I mean, I think this is right. This goes back to this idea that comes out in what a lot of people teach as responding to choreography, right? Is the Liz Lerman critical response method,
that's,
right?
yep.
is we're not looking at the lens at work through the lens of good and bad, because ultimately, who does that help? That's not helpful
Yeah.
to the artist. um, they don't really care whether you like their work or not. They want to know what you got out of it. So yeah, it's an
Mm,
important idea.
mm. Is that something that's also part of, like you spoke about young people's responses to certain work? Is that sort of discussions that you have within the school? Seeing certain, even if it's phrase work, what did you see? What did you think and why? Like delving deep into that deeper
Yeah,
analysis.
yeah. I mean, so one of the things we do throughout the programs is teaching artist observations. So,
Mm,
I mean, that's helpful for me in a lot of different ways. It's helpful as a reflective process for the faculty and I, looking at their class and having a conversation about, okay, this is going well. This is challenging. How can we meet this challenge? It's also a way for me to stay really involved in what the classes each look like. So if I am speaking to a family and they have a question about, hey, what is, so and so's class look like on Tuesday nights? I'm not speaking off, what I've heard. I've seen what that class looks like. Um, and I've seen a lot of our teachers use that method. I think we encourage them to ensure that students have the opportunity to respond to work in that way. It's part of,
mm,
how you teach critical thinking, and it's also, I think, really important when we think about some of what are considered more of our challenging age groups. I'm
yep.
thinking specifically of middle school students right now.
Not an easy age. Never, never has been, never will be.
um, I think it's really important to provide a variety of access points to learning in those classes. Um, because you may have a student who, just doesn't really connect to any other part of class in the same way that they connect to the opportunity when they get to look at other people's work or share something that they've made. So, if we are doing our job as dance educators, right? Which we have to think about that broadly, because the goal of being a dance educator, sure, we are training a generation of movers. Hopefully, I hope our students are all lifelong movers. But that's going to mean different things for them. Some of them, very few of them at our particular school are going to go off and become professional dancers. So if that's true, if very few of them are going to become professional dancers, why are we teaching the rest of them? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, I think number one is because human beings are happier when they connect with other human beings. Um, and art is one of the ways that we connect. So, we're making happier humans, I hope. um, but in addition to that, we're giving them, the skills to be really excellent audience members of dance. We're giving them the skills to be um, really excellent critical thinkers when they go off and become the next wonderful scientist who's making creative decisions in a lab. That ultimately gives us a vaccination that stops a pandemic. Like, these are the things that are important. They're not soft skills, they're hard skills. They're really important. So,
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel strongly about it.
Right. As do I, and this is what you do. Yeah. Even just knowing your body, like in the yoga world, they teach yoga. It's like
Mhm.
There are people who don't understand what their scapulas are or where their ribs are. And you have to rephrase certain cues so many times until they're like, oh, now I understand. You like,
Mhm.
okay, maybe they know what the sternum is. Like overall, our population, we're so much here. And there's this disconnection from the body and its beauty and its abilities and its range and just the wonder of what our bodies are, because we're so
Yeah.
much and now here. But
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, and what is the implication then if we're so much here and not in our bodies for, I mean, certainly our physical health, but also our mental health, you know?
absolutely. Yeah. And I'd like to just leave that as a question because I think it is beautiful food for thought. What happens when we are disconnected from our bodies? It's not good. It's a little cheat there. A little hint, not good. Um, yeah, so to start to wrap up, this has been wonderful. I'm curious about through this very challenging, unprecedented COVID times, unprecedented at least in our lives. Um, and thankfully, it's starting to wrap up. And you've been in sort of the epicenter, and we're in New York City. What has given you light? What's kept you going? In and out of your work. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I won't deny that there were some dark months there.
Oh yeah. For
And
all of us.
I make a joke about it only because, to keep from crying, right?
Yep.
It's, um, it felt as though everything that we did, um, one of my colleagues said it the other day. When and she works in a different department. She doesn't work in education, but she said, "Why is everything so much harder?" um, and so I think that that was kind of our mantra over the past year. It just felt like,
Yeah.
from delivering classes to making sure that people understood all the information that they needed to in order to engage, that people were healthy, that people were safe, that, you know, I mean, one of the first things that I had to do, so we annually have faculty check-ins, um, and it's just an opportunity for us to sit down with the faculty and have a chat about how the past year is gone and anything that's coming up for the next year. And we shut down the dance center just prior to all of the faculty check-ins had already been scheduled. Um,
Mm.
and so I spent uh, 4 weeks meeting with faculty every day who I knew the majority of whom I did not have work to sustain them.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and
So tough.
man, was that brutal. Um,
Yeah.
because, again, it comes back to this thing of like, I've worked as a teaching artist. I know what
Right.
the impact of the loss of that work is. And, you know, to a certain degree, I mean, I'm certainly not responsible for the pandemic, right? But to a certain degree, that responsibility sits on my shoulders, of
Right.
ensuring
Yeah.
that, everybody gets enough work to uh, help pay their rent. And I
Yeah.
don't take that lightly. Um, so
Mm.
the thing that sustained me through that, quite frankly, was the community that I have
Mm.
within that group of people. And I'm getting emotional about it, but they have been so incredible. I mean,
Mm.
from the way that they have adapted their classes, from the way that they've communicated with us, the way that they stayed in touch, that people ensured that they, were showing up for things, I mean, I'm sure at some points they wanted to close down their email accounts. They were receiving so much information from me. Um, but I feel so incredibly lucky to work with a team who are, from the faculty to the admin, who are so thoughtful and conscientious, and I mean, truly do work on a daily basis to do better work. Um, we don't get it perfect. And I think everyone who works with me would say that, that
Mhm.
there's, a lot of work to be done. But I feel, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, I feel hopeful, because I work with a group of people who are striving to be better.
Mm, that is beautiful. So I would love to just leave it at that. And thank you so, so much. We talked for almost an hour and I feel like it flew by. Um, yeah, until we talk again, thank you so, so much. That was wonderful. So many beautiful, like, kind of threads to pull. Yeah,
Well, thank you for inviting me. This has been,
absolutely.
I feel like this is how we process big events like this in our life, right? Is by
Uh,
sharing our stories. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll have all Alex's information that you can follow her, all that good stuff. Check out what Mark Morris Dance Group is doing. Um, you enjoyed this episode. If it resonated with you, please like, subscribe, comment, share it with a friend who you think might also enjoy all that good stuff. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye bye.